We're getting settled in. We have a nice audience today. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a great one. We've gotten to talk to Shaun for the last 30 minutes or so. Just we kind of do some pre-meeting and get to know each other. And this is going to be a great one. So we're really excited. So let's get going. Thank you again for coming. We would love to just have you tell us, how did you get into business brokerage? Why medical brokers, medical practices, and just give us the story. That's what we love to start there.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen and Ron, appreciate you inviting me to come on today. So my story is back in 2005, I was married to an endocrinologist, and we started a medical practice. And so I was the co-owner, co-founder, practice administrator for a specialty medical practice. We grew it to be three different businesses. One was an insurance-based practice, one was a cash practice, and there was another one that was a cash practice, med spa actually. And so I ran all three of those businesses. We ended up selling the businesses, all three businesses. And so we were looking at experts to help us assess the value of the business and take the business to market. Business was located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We couldn't locate a business broker with expertise in medical practices in Arizona. So we ended up expanding our search, looking outside of Arizona. We ended up hiring a broker from California. Broker was actually fairly marginal. We did close the transaction, but I just knew that because of my prior background in real estate, my experience as an owner, my experience as a practice administrator, that that there were a lot of other people in the same shoes that we were in. What's my business worth, and how do I exit? Uh, and so I wanted, after we sold the business back in October of 2018, I wanted to start this company to help other physician owners that had built something that was valuable, but didn't know what it was worth and didn't know how to exit. So that was really the genesis of starting the company. I didn't think the company would become a national boutique firm that it has, but that's just, there's a lot of demand out there. There's not a lot of people with the expertise in the medical industry.
Mm, mm. And you chose just specialize, and you were saying that you it's very, I mean, you stay very focused. You don't go too broad in the category and stay very focused.
Yeah, I felt like my background, I was qualified to help people with medical practices. I could think and speak like an owner. I could speak like a seller and the emotions of a seller. I could solve problems and answer questions that buyers had about, aspects of running a business, and hiring and billing and whatnot. So I felt qualified within the medical practice realm, but I certainly wouldn't feel qualified with if it's a dental practice or a home health business. That's nothing that I owned or ran and managed. So I chose to stay very focused in my lane. We don't take chiropractic practices. We don't take home health practices. Um, so so we have been very focused the whole time.
And you list Phoenix, Dallas, and Tampa on your logo there. So tell us about that.
Yeah.
And do
So
you work
so
nationally?
I work nationally, and we have a team. But my first client out of state was actually another endocrinology practice that sought us out and needed assistance with their practice. Very very good endocrinology practice, and so they interviewed us. They interviewed another medical practice broker, selected our firm, and so we just knew that the Florida market was much larger market than the Arizona market. And so it made sense to have a presence in the Florida market. So we opened an office in Tampa. Our next client that we ended up representing was a ENT outside of the Dallas Fort Worth area. And so we ended up opening an office in Dallas. So our core markets initially were Arizona, Texas, and Florida. We
Hmm.
actually work more in Florida than anywhere else.
That's where the people are, and typically skews a little older down there, so there's probably more
Hmm.
doctors down there per capita.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So listen, Shaun, that's phenomenal. Love, you took your expertise and brought it into our industry, which is why we're here to learn at your feet today. So really excited to hear more about this. Talk a little bit, if you will, before I dive into some of the regular questions we asked. Talk a little bit about what makes the medical practice different from other Main Street businesses. What are some of the either the emotional and or the business aspects that are really unique that you tend to focus on when you're working with your clients?
Well, obviously to become a physician, it's no easy task. Okay.
Uh,
And so
Seems to take forever, doesn't
it
it?
does take forever. So these are very intelligent people that, work very hard to get where they're at. Um, so and physicians are used to having excellent service and lots of people, tending to them, and they're pretty insulated as a group. They have great gatekeepers, and um, licensure is a big thing, and so and with all of that comes regulations. Different states have different rules. Say, for example, in Florida, if you are a non-licensed physician in Florida and you want to buy a practice there, you need to get a um, a Florida business license in order to legally run that clinic. And so it all stems from the corporate practice of medicine rules, which vary from state to state. Some are extremely stringent, such as California, one of the most stringent in the country. But corporate practice of medicine says who can who can legally own a medical practice, and so there's a complexity of that, and then there is just the whole revenue and how that all comes into play in contracting and credentialing. So it's just really complex. And if you haven't been in it for quite some time, it's a pretty steep learning curve.
Yeah, and they've got this third party payer program right out there that if you don't understand that, that kind of underpins the business aspect of all primary medical practice these days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so with that, credentialing, licensure, that's a tough thing. And so, understanding how best to navigate that, what, what is going to be the best solution? Is it going to be a stock transaction? Is it going to be an asset transaction? I would tell you probably 70% of our transactions are actually stock transactions.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So, you mentioned that you don't do like chiropractic, right? You are really focused on basically traditional medical practices, if you will. Um, yeah.
So traditional, but also, in traditional, people think of just insurance-based practices, but we
Right.
also represent concierge practices, which are cash practices. Some are hybrid practices where they take insurance, but they also charge a membership fee. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
within, if they are primary care or specialty, and they're receiving a fee for services provided, usually a brick and mortar location. And they have revenues between 1 and 10 million. That is a client that we would work with.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, when are you guys very selective with your clients once they cross this kind of industry threshold? Do you basically take all comers, or do you have a qualification process for your clients, and you'll only take ones that fulfill, certain criteria?
Yes, we are pretty specific. And just to kind of go back a little bit, selling a medical practice is complicated and it takes a long time. Dental practices actually sell much quicker than medical practices.
Mm.
So, medical practices, primary care medical practices, we typically can sell one of those in about 10 months, plus or minus a couple months. But a specialty practice would take us anywhere from 12 to 16 months to get it sold. And then you have a seller that's going to need to stay on for transition after that. So,
Hmm.
it's a long haul to get one of these medical practices sold, and the multiples are actually on the low end. So it's a lot of work, and and the uh, transaction price is on the low.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a different world, right? And it's, and I was sharing with you, I had a little bit of experience, and I'm curious about this from your perspective. It seems like you kind of have to be an expert in two areas, because you have like a practice manager who runs the whole business side of the practice, and then you've got the specialist that really runs the medical arm, and the all of the nursing staff and so forth. So, it's almost like you have two businesses within the same organization.
Absolutely. And, and doctors are excellent at patient care and making medical decision making, but they clearly need that operations, that business side of it in order for it to work. And so, and very, very important. And so when we're looking at, practices to sell, looking at that team and making sure that team is going to, remain on, it's absolutely critical for a buyer. So
Who's typically the owner between those two? Are they usually jointly owning it, or is it mostly the physician? Or
the physician is the owner, but
okay,
absolutely. But there's a lot of trust and a lot of delegation and a lot of you know responsibility that practice administrator has.
yeah,
They know everything. Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So when you are looking at taking on a client, I'm sure you
mhm.
you probably have a very customized client intake process that you go through.
So we're going to want to know, why are they selling? We're going to want to know, what is their willingness for, transition period? What's their timeline? If somebody
Mhm.
tells us that, I want to, my lease is up in, 6 months and I don't want to renew it, and I'll go month to month after that. Well, that's based on our timeline, how long it takes, that we don't have enough runway there. So that would be a deal killer right there. We require that a physician pay for evaluation, and so if they're not willing to pay for evaluation, we're not going to take them on as a client. We want to be able to see what the financials look like, and we want to get paid for our analysis and expertise to come back and give them that range of most probable selling price. So also wanting to look to see kind of what are they organized? Are they responsive? Are they coachable? Some physicians are not. And so, is it somebody that we would enjoy working with for this long engagement that we're going to have? And obviously it
Yeah.
has to meet revenue, and, technology, and it has to have tenure and staff, and it has to be something of, a very successful practice.
Shaun, in your experience, how many folks in the practice are typically aware of the process that you guys are leading? Is it typically just the doctor and the office manager, or
Mm.
do you often get involved with a broader range of the staff?
It's usually those two people. Okay. And sometimes it's the accountant, maybe they'll be providing some of the financial information, but the doctor, they don't know how to get into the practice management side of their software and run the kind of reports that we need. So they need to bring somebody in. And if they're uncomfortable with that, then we have to kind of go hire a consultant, a vendor that knows that expertise, that has the knowledge base for that particular EMR system, and then bring them in to log in on the weekend to get the information that we need. So sometimes we work around it that way.
Yeah, so the electronic medical record system that you're talking about, right, is something that's specific to these practices, and it's intertwined. Some of the sophisticated products are intertwined with all their billing and all aspects of their practice. So you definitely need to be versed in those tools and how to be able to, steer them to get the information out of those things, right?
Yeah, every buyer is going to want certain reports, and so
Yeah.
we need to have the ability to deliver those reports to the buyers. If we can't, then it's going to really be hard to market that practice.
Yeah.
And then
Eh,
when you go through the intake and you've got your business and you're preparing to take it to market, do you typically follow we're going to create teasers or flyers and brochures or offering memorandums? Do you typically go through what we might consider in the brokerage kind of a standard information package?
So we have a pretty extensive when they become a client, and we have an onboarding process, and we send them a questionnaire. That questionnaire is about 15 pages long.
Holy cow! Wow.
It's a little painful, and we tell them this is going to be painful, but we collect that information, and that information gets populated into our sim, and then
Hmm.
from that sim we'll do a teaser depending upon the size of the transaction. Our sims uh, are usually about 15, 20 pages long. Pretty extensive. The goal is to be able to identify and answer a good 80-85% of the questions that they have. We also do a seller interview and embed that into the sim as well. We want
Yeah.
buyers to look at that.
Are
Yeah.
you using video to do that seller's interview by chance?
We are.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. We started doing
Yeah.
that in our practice last year, and it's been amazingly effective. Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
just had a conversation with a buyer just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and we want, and they are a private equity buyer, and so we said, we need to understand your timeline. We need to make sure that your investment thesis would follow and be supportive of what our owner is looking to accomplish. And so, first step, when you sign the NDA and you get the SIM, I want your team to read and watch this video and make sure that we're a fit, because that's step one.
Incredible. That's awesome. I love to hear that.
And
What
Shaun, you were
are,
saying at the beginning that the mindset of the business owner that you're doing with a physician, are they thinking that they have a sellable business, that they should just close their doors, that nobody could replace them? What's the mindset as they're thinking
Yeah.
about this?
So if they're smaller practices, and most are, okay, so most practices are going to be solo doc or solo physician, maybe two physicians and a couple mid levels. That'd be nurse practitioner or physician assistant. So those practices, they don't really have a sense whether or not there is much value there. And so, and if it's marketable at all, I hear that quite a bit. And so they see their colleagues that are just closing their doors and storing their medical records, or giving their medical records away to a colleague, and not and exiting the business that way. And so most physicians aren't certain that they have value. Now, if they're scaled up, then they have a sense there's something there. Maybe they've got better advisors and they've been coached from their accountants and maybe wealth consultants, that maybe there's some value in their business. But if it's a smaller practice, oftentimes they are not certain if their practice has any value.
And once they do, what's the mindset of selling and who are they looking to sell to? What's important to them? I know it varies, but
So, I mean, they're thrilled to when we do the valuation, and they understand that, wow, this is, oftentimes it's quite a bit more than what they were than they were even hoping for. And so, but most of our clients are independent practices, and they would love to see their practice. And then they've been fighting a tough fight for a long time, and there's a lot of consolidation in the industry, a lot of corporatization of healthcare. And so they have been kind of these islands that have been getting fewer and fewer. And so their their dream is really to find a younger version of themselves that could step in and take over the practice. They want nothing more. These physicians are generally pretty well off, but so their motivation is really about, I want I want you as a broker to find an excellent provider that can come in and step in and deliver great care for my patients. That's the first priority for them. The second priority for them is they want somebody who's going to retain the staff. The staff is like family to them. They've been with them for a long time. And then the third thing is they're delivering an important service to their community. They want to see that continue. And then the last thing is they want a fair price for their practice. So that is common. That's the common MO of our clients. And ideally, they want to see somebody come in and keep the practice private.
Yeah.
So that's a key thing there. What you just talked about is generally, I don't want people to skim over this. Generally, these folks are well off, right? They're not relying on the sale of their practice to fund their retirement. So their motivation is completely different than maybe a lot of Main Street brokers are typically dealing with up front. And I think that's a key point to drive home.
So for us, a lot of it is about fit and matchmaking. And so there's a lot of buyers out there that have that financial ability to step forward and could write the check. And there's plenty of money out there to finance these practices. But it's really about finding that fit, somebody that's going to honor the culture, the style of medicine that they're delivering in that practice. And so for us, having that seller video and having them understand, what the patient experience is like and what the culture of the practice is like is really, really important and helpful for us to bring forward buyers that are going to be a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent. So talk a little bit about, if you will, you had mentioned that, there are certain things that buyers, certain statistics or key performance indicators or, things of that nature, unique questions that buyers are typically asking about. Give us a sense of some of those things that, a normal Main Street broker might normally not think of when they approach, a physician, or a physician approaches them and asks them to represent them in this process.
Yes. So there are 5 main KPIs in a medical practice. So the first one deals with revenue cycle, and revenue cycle is all about when you provide a service and then you go and go through the process of submitting a claim to get paid for that. So one of the metrics that people look at is days in AR. How long is that money once that claim has been submitted? How long is that money sitting out there before it gets converted to cash? The next part of revenue cycle metrics is net collection rate. And what is the collectability of all the claims that get submitted? Another metric that's looked at is first pass claim acceptance. So how clean are the claims that get submitted out there through the billing process? And the last one is kind of looking at on AR, the aging AR. So AR over 120 days. What percentage of AR is old AR? So that is all about revenue cycle. That's just one of the metrics. The next metric is operation metrics. And so that we're looking at kind of throughput of a business. So how many patient visits per provider per day are they seeing? And how does that measure up against the benchmark for that particular specialty? No-show rate. That's huge because you only have X number of slots per day, that a provider is there. They're expensive, they get paid well, be there. And so you want to make sure that you minimize that no-show rate as much as possible. So no-show rate, and then appointment utilization. And that is looking at the ability to fill the schedule. What percentage of all those available slots are being filled every day? So that's kind of the operations metrics of it. And then financial metrics are probably, and one of the ones that's common in all industries is, okay, what's the SDE or what's the EBITDA margin? But another one that's unique is payer mix. And payer mix is really what is the breakdown of the insurance component in a practice. And so what percentage of the insurance component is commercial insurance? That would be like a United or an Aetna or a Cigna. Those are commercial insurance. What percentage of the payer mix is a federal plan, like a Medicare or a Medicaid? And then what percentage might be cash? So payer mix is important in a financial metric. And then the other one is revenue per encounter, looking at that. So that's the third one of those main KPIs.
Mm.
The next one is staff productivity. And that's looking at, what is the support staff for for provider? Okay, is there adequate staff in there? Because if there isn't, then you have providers that are getting paid, say, $250,000 a year as a wage, but they're doing medical assistant work because they don't have enough staff, or they're doing nursing work that they shouldn't be doing. Everybody should be working to the top of their license. But if you don't have the right business model and the right support, then you don't have that support staff to allow them just to go and do medical decision making and see patients because they're busy doing, other lower level work. So that is staff productivity. The last one is compliance metrics, and that's looking at coding accuracy, documentation lag. How long is it from the time that the visit was conducted and the claim is submitted, and then denial rates. So those are the main metrics that are unique in a medical practice that I would say most business brokers, generalists wouldn't know about.
Mm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
probably all of those.
Yeah.
Most businesses would most business brokers would be somewhat familiar with AR, but it's almost unbelievable. Medical practice is the fact that they have this net collection cost. What percentage do they actually get paid of what they bill? And
Mhm.
it's very commonly less than 100%. Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's astounding. So definitely a lot of complexity in what you just talked about. So knowing those questions, if those are the things buyers are looking for, and you don't know upfront to get that information, then a referral to Shaun would be probably the best potential outcome that you could help deliver for those clients.
When it's interesting because the you're seeing this with like restaurants, like if you make a reservation, you're putting a credit card on. If you cancel too late, you're going to get charged. Doctors and dentists and people like that are starting to do it because now you're helping me understand the importance of that. That's a time slot that at the last minute they can't fill, and
Mhm.
we're all seeing that. Like it's not okay to just and I think it's because like my parents' generation, you wouldn't not go to your appointment. And now it's like, hey, I've got a thing. I just can't come. And so they're compensating for that. And how we're seeing that shift is pretty interesting. And you're dealing with that. I mean, that's critical time that is staying open. Um,
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely.
interesting.
So yeah, so we do, in our own practice that we own, we were a pretty early adopter of charging the no-show fee. And so you kind of have a grace policy, one time yeah, one free offense, and after that you would enforce that policy. And if it was habitual, you would terminate them because you couldn't
Yeah.
afford to have that patient in your practice.
Yeah.
Invite them to take their record somewhere else, eh?
Exactly.
I don't think
That's
brokers are doing that policy yet. There's no show fee, is there, Steve?
we're, we seem to be too glad to have them, I think, in most
Yeah.
ways. Shaun, there's also got to be a lot of secret sauce around finding the buyers, right? Because as you
Mm.
said, the ownership can vary from state to state, whether you are the licensed medical provider or not, right? And
Mhm.
I would imagine that most doctors are not shopping biz by sell every day to see if there's another practice out there they can buy. So are you willing to share with us some of the things that you guys focus on in terms of marketing to buyers that might be different than a normal Main Street business broker?
Yeah, so we'll do the same things that other brokers do as well. I mean, so we are on all the regular sites as everybody else. Um, but we also are, and really finding the buyers isn't a challenge for us. There's a lot of buyers out there. It's weeding through those buyers and identifying who is, a serious buyer that's going to actually perform. Um, but but it's about bringing quality practices to the market. There's enough demand out there and enough people looking. Healthcare is a pretty safe bet. Okay, we don't have issues with tariffs. It's pretty recession resistant. People are going to need healthcare. There's a shortage of physicians out there, so buyers are looking for quality practices coming to the market where the information is prepared. The process is going to be, it's going to be standardized. And so we do, do online. We also do direct mail, more farming on the seller side than on the buyer side, but we do find buyers out of that as well. But it's really about just bringing the right practices to the market. We find, being a national boutique firm, we might have a group that's in Florida that's bought practices from us in Florida, and now they want to move into another market. So maybe they want to go into Texas, and so because we've had transactions and experience, and we work well together, then they're looking at our inventory we have in, say, Texas.
Does that same kind of dynamic occur within the specialty? So if you've got an endocrinologist practice, right, you probably have a list of buyers that are only looking for endocrinology practices out there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so in that we would go and you do the same things everybody else does. You're going to be, if we're marketing endocrinology practice, we're going to market to all the other endocrinology practices that are in our market. But a lot of times the specialties like endocrinology, there's about maybe less than 6,000 endocrinologists in the country. And so if we're when we marketed our practice in Sarasota, Florida wasn't a big enough pool for us. So we looked at what are the 10 states where there's inbound migration into Florida. So we marketed to all those other states, to the endocrinologists specifically in those other states that could be considering relocating to Florida.
Interesting.
So you have to kind of cast a wider net. The smaller that subspecialty is, the bigger the net needs to be.
And how important is it for the seller to basically, meet the buyer and be comfortable with the buyer before they accept a deal?
So we've really worked on that process, and I'm thrilled to say that our dropout rate is about 20% once they go under contract. So
That's
80% success rate, but we make it difficult for a buyer to go under LOI, and so we want the process to go slow. We don't want to race it. If somebody says, I want to submit an LOI, we're going to put the brakes on that right away. We want them to have looked at the SIM. We want them to have spent time investing and learning about the data that's in the SIM. So we use technology to help us with that. In fact, Ron was one of the sessions several years ago. He doesn't remember this, of course, but he told us about a platform that would give us the sales intelligence, and so we've been using that platform ever since to have that sales intelligence. But yeah, so we will require that buyer to provide us proof of funds before we're going to share any underlying financials. So if they want to see tax returns, redacted tax returns, or they want to see P&Ls, they're going to have to provide proof of funds. We're going to want them to have a virtual seller interview and a buyer-seller meeting virtually first. We're certainly participating and facilitating that. And then we're going to want them to actually come see the practice second. So, and these meetings are usually done outside of business hours because the sale is confidential. And after that, and we've seen that they've really put the time into it, and we know that they have the financial capability, then we've felt that there's a good fit there, and our client feels that there's a good fit, then we're delighted to receive that letter of intent. But we kind of make them go through those different hurdles before we get there.
You make them date a little bit before they can get engaged, huh?
Exactly.
I like it.
This is just a quick moment with a little bit of time left. If anybody in the audience has any questions, you use the chat, the Q&A, raise your hand. We'll take those as they come in. Otherwise, we'll keep going here. Shaun, on that, what percentage of like when a doctor's selling, I'm sure they're thinking like, well, what percentage of patients kind of stay in with a new owner? Like, do you
Mm,
have a
mm,
number there? Because that would be like an opportunity for people to switch when it's this type of specialty. Do you see a
right.
lot of uh retention, any loss of retention there?
So we see quite a bit of retention. We don't see that much patient attrition because they're very comfortable. And you think about it, it's tough to establish with a new provider.
Yeah.
And the average wait time to get in to see, and this is across all specialties, is over 40 days. So if you wanted to get established, you're going to wait over a month to be
Mm,
seen as a new patient
right.
in most practices. So they're going to give that buyer a chance. Okay. And the buyer is going to have to earn their trust, that new physician, successor physician. But patients will stay in the practice. They know the staff. They're very comfortable with the person that checks them in. They're comfortable with a medical assistant that takes their vitals and takes their history.
Yeah.
The nursing staff that is a higher level than that. Um, and so the team is there, and as long as the person that we bring in as the successor is a good fit, the patients will stay.
That's a
Mm.
great point too, Ron, because I don't know, Shaun, if how prevalent this is, but I do know in the state of Missouri, the buyer has to issue a letter to every patient in the database, whether they're an active patient or, a non-active patient. And that letter gives them the right to take their file and go someplace else. So you have to inform them of the change of the doctor and basically, force the patient to vote. And I don't think I've ever had to do that in a straight business to business kind of a
Well, in
transaction.
fact, that's one of the roles of the business brokers to protect so that the customers or the clients don't know that the business changes hands. So yet that kind of
Mm.
strips away the whole
Yeah.
confidentiality of a new owner. But what do you
So,
think about that,
so,
Shaun?
so it varies so certainly one of the things that's important, we kind of talk about, the complexity of this. One of the, complexity of this is each medical board, state medical board has different rules about this. And so if the, if the patients can remain in the practice, okay, if the physician is closing the doors, okay, and the patients are going to have to scatter to the wind, then they have to give proper notice and they have to maintain records and be able to transfer records. That's the requirement. If the practice is going to stay intact care is going to continue to be delivered at that location, it just happens to be a new physician, then a lot of times the notice doesn't have to go. But
Mm,
it does vary state by state.
Shaun, and I'm curious, I would think you mentioned you guys do a lot of kind of single or two doctor practices. Do you find that in a lot of those, they own their facilities as well? They own the building that they're in?
I'd say about 30-40% of the time,
Yeah.
our client owns the real estate. So we'll represent the real estate in addition to the practice. But if the real estate comes to us, it's a healthcare piece of real estate not associated with the practice sale, we wouldn't take it.
Hmm.
mm.
Okay. Okay. So you're
And
not doing only real estate. You're doing the
right.
practice first and real estate if
Yes,
it's included. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Talk a
What
little bit,
what
in the last 15 minutes, I'd love to, and I know our audience is going to be mad at us if we don't, talk a little bit about
Yeah,
valuation and what do you
yeah.
see are the things that are, talk about valuation in general, and then what do you see as the things that are kind of the adders to value? What would make it kind of a premium even in its domain? And what are the subtractors from value as you see them in your field?
sure, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, the multiples in medical practices are on the lower end. All right. So the practices that have gross revenues less than $1 million, that's usually going to be the solo practice. Um, we will see multiples. Seller discretionary earnings is typically is the metric that we're looking at, and the multiple there is going to be 1.5 to 1.7. That's typically what we see. If it's a rural practice, it's a distressed practice, that multiple might be as low as one. And if it's, it might be as high as two. But that in practices where gross revenues net collection is less than $1 million, typically 1.5 to 1.7. I know sometimes people look at a percentage of gross revenue as a multiple. We don't look at that much. We really look at the seller discretionary earnings, or if it's a larger practice, EBITDA. And if you think about gross collections, that can be very misleading from practice to practice. So let's take a rheumatology practice. A lot of that revenue is driven because of the drug cost. All right. And so you've got a huge cost of goods sold versus an internal medicine practice. You don't have that. So using revenue as a multiple against revenue, I don't think is very reliable. But so practices that gross revenues are between 1 and 5 million, we would see a multiple between 1.8 and 2 typically. Practices between 5 and 10 million, we'd see a SDE multiple of 2.2 to 2.5. And in those practices from 1 million to 10 million, in some cases, we're going to have EBITDA. Certainly in the ones where there is 5 to 10 million, we're going to have EBITDA. In practices that are 1 to 1.5 million, may or may not have EBITDA.
And you're typically selling the practice, as you said, most of the time you're doing share sales, which is a really nice way to do it. But basically, that's everything included. That's including all of their supplies, all their equipment. It's when you're talking about kind of an asset sale transaction, it's all in at that point, right?
So yeah, so most of our transactions are going to be stock transactions because getting those payer contracts is very difficult. All right, and sometimes those panels are closed. Maybe they were open 15 years ago, but that new provider can't get that panel. So because of that complexity and revenue lag and delays in getting credentialing, 70% of our transactions are stock transactions. So that's typically what we deal with there.
Yeah. And is there much owner financing that happens in your world, or is the bank financing so easy to get that you don't have to worry about that?
So we offer it because if we offer seller financing, so typically we'll offer about 10% seller financing. That's something our sellers need to be willing to offer. And we do that really for marketability purposes than anything. But in reality, if we have a seller that's going to, mirror the SBA 7A loan rate and say they're going to ask for, 10 to 12% interest, there are commercial banks out there that are really a better fit for a physician buyer that's going to go and buy that practice because they can get 100% financing and they can get interest rates in the sub 6% range right now. So why would a buyer take seller's 10% money? So the financing is plentiful. Banks love to loan money to doctors because they see them as a good credit risk.
It's the lowest default rate. So so and many of the larger banks have got specialty lending arms that just focus on those. So I was amazed to learn that was the easiest part of the deal, was getting doctor practices financed.
So we don't do that much SBA. We'll use SBA if the situation requires it, or if there's real estate and maybe it makes sense to look at it from a SBA standpoint. But yeah, for the most part, it's going to one of these physician practice groups that has a specialty and very aggressive pricing.
Do you use medical associations, or either on a local, statewide, or national level? And are you very active in those areas from a prospecting standpoint or a marketing standpoint for practices that you're offering for sale?
We haven't needed to do that, and so we do belong to an association called the Medical Group Management Association that absolutely have the best benchmarking data. So if you're trying to understand what the productivity should be for a cardiologist in a practice in Southeast US, then this would be the data to obtain is from this organization. So I belong to that because there are good resources within there for our clients. So that, or also sometimes being part of the a local chapter to give back some education to the membership or the local medical societies. Those would be good places to start. I haven't tried to use and market practices in trade journals because it just doesn't seem to be a good ROI for us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that the doctors talk to their peers in the market a lot? So if, you know, if you're an endocrinologist in a city, do you tend to, and you're interested in retiring, do they tend to call up the other endocrinologists in the city and say, "Hey, I want to retire. Do you want to take over my book?"
They do a little bit of that as well.
Yeah.
And so so we want to kind of time that right, and we want to kind of because sometimes that can backfire as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about the future of, like I'm seeing a trend of the cash only or the boutique or the
Mhm.
subscription model, or what
Mhm.
is the look, what is the forecast for medical practices?
That's a great question, Ron. So there is absolutely physicians are absolutely tired of having insurance control how much money they make. And so, the reimbursements for physicians has been declining, costs have been going up, margins have been getting compressed. And so physicians that have great practices are looking at it, and they don't have time because the insurance dictating how much time they can spend with a patient because of the amount of reimbursement that they have. So a lot of physicians are opting out of traditional insurance and going to these concierge models. We sell quite a few of those. And so where they take their panel of 2000 and they flip the switch and they go concierge, and maybe they take 10-15% of that panel with them to start concierge, and now they can have their time back and they can have quality life. They're not rushed with their appointments. They can have that relationship or build on that relationship and have the time back that they didn't have. And so we're seeing quite a bit of that is happening. There is direct primary care practices that are out there, and that's kind of a niche below concierge where it's a membership. It's kind of a more of a pay as you go kind of a model for access to care. Works really well for people that have high deductibles and but need affordable care. And so that is the trend. And so there's going to be less and less providers wanting to continue fighting the insurance battle and going more this direction. And so
Mm,
initially it started with primary care, and now we're seeing more specialty that is doing it.
mm,
And
mm,
and actually Florida was kind of the birthplace of concierge medicine. So it started
mm,
it started in Florida.
Interesting. That's interesting. It's going to trickle down. That's an interesting concept. I'm a big fan that it's going that direction. So, what about brokers? Because we're going to run out of time. I know, like Steve said, there's another question that brokers are going to have is like, hey, how can we utilize Shaun? So how can brokers that are watching this work with you potentially?
So I'll add my email to the chat here, so you could certainly email me. And we're happy to have a conversation with a seller and educate them. There's no pressure. We want them to understand kind of what their options are. Again, our ideal client is somebody between 1 and 10 million. And really we can work across the country. So if you're active in a particular state, we certainly can talk about that. But typically, we would love to have that introduction and gladly pay a referral fee.
And a question came in from one of our audience members. How do you find younger versions of physicians? Are they using the traditional search websites, or is there more than can be done to pull in younger buyers who are ready to go independent?
Okay, so the interesting thing is that in the past, physicians were entrepreneurial. Now they are not. They're all about
Mm,
going in, and so we don't find physicians coming out of their training wanting to own and start a medical practice right away. They have to go out and work in corporate healthcare where they're going to get paid very well and get abused,
mm,
and then they're ready to kind of come back into and open to buying a practice. So
yeah.
younger physicians, it's extremely rare to have a younger physician step forward and go straight from training into purchasing a practice.
So even though
Yeah.
the seller may want that younger version of themselves, that's hard to find.
Yes, yes. So it's a fantasy, and
Mm,
it doesn't. The probability of it happening is extremely low.
no.
I'll give you a quick story. My niece graduated medical school and did her pudding last spring, and she got, her residency. She got her #1 residency pick, and I was with her over the holidays, and she was telling me that it's like every physician that she meets with hands her their card and says, once you finish, call me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's this whole informal network of trying to get all these young practitioners to migrate into the various offices that way as well. And
Mm.
I guess that's probably been in place for a long period of time.
Absolutely. They're wired for employment to start with. They've got a lot of debt. And so
Yeah.
they need to kind of learn how it all works. And so that's the best scenario for them, just most of them, just to go employment to start.
So if they're not entrepreneurial, then partnering with that practice manager is really the that hire is really important to. I mean, that's really the opportunity in buying some of these. I would think is, hey, there's so much opportunity because I'm really just a doctor. I'm not really a business guy. I'm not really the financial person. I've got this many time slots. There's a lot of things I've thought we should do. So there's probably a lot of upside to buying a lot of these that you can promote for the seller, I would think.
Absolutely. So you gotta share those opportunities, where the opportunities are for growth and revenue improvement in those practices. And so they certainly need to have good solid staff in place. And then there's practice management consultants out there that can help
Yeah.
if they want to take it to the next level.
Right, right. And somebody's asking as well. I want to make sure we cover people's questions, but they said, and I guess I told you this, but I forget what it was. Which sales intelligence platform did I recommend to
Mm.
you that you're using?
DocSend.
Oh yeah, yeah. DocSend is a great. We've actually kind of built something proprietary now in our Deal Studio platform. But yeah, DocSend is got bought by Dropbox, but great
Mhm.
platform. So yeah. Well, hey Sean, we're at the time. I promised you, and we've this never disappoints, Steve. It always goes so much faster. There's so many questions that we don't get to that. I think every one that we've done, I feel like there's a part two that needs to happen. Um, but
Without question. And listen, I want before you wrap us completely, I want to encourage people go to other brokers, go to Shaun's website. He's got an
mm,
incredible amount of video material, other downloadable material. He's got a huge amount of resources, and he's really done a marvelous job. It's among the best I've ever seen. So I strongly encourage other brokers if they're looking at the medical field and looking at representing them, reach out to Shaun and take a look at his material because it's outstanding. It's really good.
yeah, and
We
I
can
don't
we
think the
can all
chat
take a
will be.
huge lesson from Shaun. I can tell you
And the
that for
chat
sure.
won't be seen on the video, so it is Shaun at strategicmedicalbrokers.com. So just like his logo, strategicmedicalbrokers.com, just because people won't see that in the chat or on the video. So, hey, Shaun, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Steve, we're back at it, 2026. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks for our next episode and our next industry. And I hope everybody has a great year and take advantage of our industry experts through the BRG. They are all a great resource, just like Shaun, and they are willing to help. And it's something that everybody should take advantage of this year. So hope everybody has a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so
Thanks so
much.
much, Shaun. Take
See you,
care.
Thank you.
Shaun. Thanks,
My
guys.
pleasure. Bye bye.